Good evening and welcome tonight. Glad you could be here on this chilly evening. Pastor, of course, is away. This week he's down in Oklahoma City, as he mentioned on Sunday that he'd be down there for the Church Planners Conference and the Jehovah Jireh Foundation meeting, and sounds like things are going good so far. So tonight I will be filling in, and filling in also something we haven't really done before, filling in the next message in the same series. So we'll actually still be in the Proverbs series tonight. Pastor kind of gave me the text selection tonight and asked me to sort of kind of gave me a little bit of his thoughts on it and asked me to kind of just take that and do the next message. So hopefully I don't ruin his whole series with this message tonight. But we'll still be in Proverbs chapter 10. This will be the third of the three messages out of Proverbs 10. As Pastor mentioned a few weeks ago, just decided to kind of look at some overarching themes that show up throughout the chapter. And we looked at a couple of themes already, and then one of the other very prominent themes in Proverbs 10 is the common theme of speech, or the mouth, how we use our words. And you'll see that very clearly as we read. So I'll give you some of these verses. We'll just kind of jump from verse to verse throughout the chapter here. Starting with verse 8 is the first one we'll read. Proverbs 10:8 says, "The wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall." And verse 10, "He that winketh with the eye causeth sorrow." And like we heard in the last one, "but a prating fool shall fall. The mouth of a righteous man is a well of life, but violence covereth the mouth of the wicked. Hatred stirreth up strifes, but love covereth all sins. In the lips of him that hath understanding wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him that is void of understanding. Wise men lay up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction." And then skip down to verse 18. "He that hideth hatred with lying lips, and he that uttereth slander is a fool. In the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. The tongue of the just is as choice silver. The heart of the wicked is little worth. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for want of wisdom." And then down at verse 31, and it says, "The mouth of the just bringeth forth wisdom, but the froward tongue shall be cut out. And the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked speaketh frowardness." There's a lot of nuggets of wisdom here on how we use our speech, how we use our mouth. So the title tonight is "A Guarded Mouth." And let's have a word of prayer before we get into it. Our Father in heaven, we are thankful to be gathered in your house. Lord, we're thankful for another time to be exposed to your word and to allow it to sanctify us. You said that your word is truth, and we are sanctified by your truth. And so we ask tonight that as we consider and submit to the truth, that you would do that work of sanctification in us. Would you please lead and guide now as we look at these words and be glorified in this whole service, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. A guarded mouth. What is the purpose of a guard? Why would someone hire a security guard or maybe put a guard dog in their yard? What motivates someone to use some kind of guard? Well, of course, there's something of value that they don't want stolen or harmed, somewhere on their property. They're using a guard to defend against harm, someone that would do harm. And tonight I want to talk to you about a guard for your mouth. But this is also going to involve not just guarding your mouth, but also your heart. Because anytime we talk about the mouth, we know the mouth is very, very closely tied to your heart. And so a guarded mouth is very related to a guarded heart. So we will, by the end of the message, we'll also get into a guarded heart. But really the focus of these Proverbs is mostly on our speech. When it comes to guarding our heart, you could say we're guarding something that's very valuable to us, right? The same reason you would use a security guard or a guard dog is there's something of great value you don't want harmed. And so you would guard your heart, your spiritual condition, so that it doesn't become corrupt and hard. It's valuable, and so you protect it. Well, when it comes to guarding your mouth, it kind of goes the other direction. It's more about protecting the other people around you from the harm that you can do with your own words. So a guarded mouth is really, it's more about guarding others from the damage you can do with your own mouth. To have a guarded mouth is to recognize the value in the other people around you, and to put up a guard for their sake. To set up a guard so that they could be protected from the harm that you could do, potentially. So how do we do that? How do we recognize what kind of speech needs to be guarded against? And I think these Proverbs give us some very good parameters and guidelines and wisdom on the kind of speech that we need to be aware of. We'll start in verse 8. It says, "The wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall." That phrase, prating fool, the first time I read it, I don't know about you, but I've never used the word prating. And I've never heard anyone use it in speech. It's one of those words that it's an older word, so we don't really use it. I did not know, so I had to look this up. What is that talking about? Well, literally in the Hebrew, the phrase is a fool of lips. A fool of lips. Or you could say, maybe in modern vernacular, you could say, to keep it catchy, a mouthy moron, maybe you could say. Or a lippy idiot. Someone who talks a lot and it shows that they don't know that much because they're talking. This pitfall here is the foolishness of speaking when it's time to be listening. Perhaps if you've ever taught children, a very important principle to try to get to them very early on is when the teacher is speaking, right, you are not supposed to be speaking. That is an important principle for them to learn while they're young, because if they never get over that, that's what this is talking about, someone who talks when it's time to be quiet and listen. Or maybe later on in life, there's people perhaps who never did get over that, and they're always confident in their own way of doing things, and whenever it's time for them to learn, they confidently speak over about how they know how this is actually supposed to be done. No matter how much knowledge or expertise they have, they are sure, right? They know the best way. I'm sure I know the best way to do this, and you can see how this can get someone into trouble, right? If someone gets a new job, and they won't listen to instruction that's going to quickly either get them into a situation they don't know what to do about, or just get them in trouble with their boss, because when it was time for them to learn this new job, they either didn't pay attention or they just talked. They just talked over, and now they find themselves in a situation they don't know what to do. When you speak, when it's time to be learning, you're trapping yourself in the prison of your own limited knowledge. You cannot grow in knowledge and wisdom and understanding if you speak when it's time to listen. When you have someone perhaps someone wiser than you, offering counsel about how to deal with a life situation, how to parent, or how to be a spouse, or how to navigate this situation, this social situation as a Christian, or how to handle your finances wisely, those kinds of things. Someone who's wiser and older, and they want to offer you some direction, but you're just so confident, no, I know what's best. If that is always your response, is to just tell them, well, this is actually what I'm going to do, when they try to offer you some instruction, you will find yourself in some very unnecessarily difficult and complicated situations. The consequences of such a habit of unguarded speech are listed in verses 8, 13, and 14 in the second half. It says in 8, a prating fool shall fall, And also 10 ends that way as well. And then 13 says, a rod is for the back of him that is void of understanding. And 14 says at the end, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction. If you speak over those from whom you should be learning, you are simply preparing yourself for disaster. If you don't be quiet when wiser people are offering you instruction, you're going to find yourself in trouble. Verse 20 says, the tongue of the just is as choice silver, and the heart of the wicked is little worth. I believe the word for heart there is referring to, there's kind of a range of meaning that the word for heart can mean in the Bible, and one of the senses of that word is the mind. It's your thought. It includes your thought life, and I think that's the one it's pointing to here mostly, which you could say then is if you're always speaking instead of listening, you're going to have a worthless mind. If your mouth is always running, it shows there's not actually much going on up here, right? There needs to be times when you control yourself to stop talking. And you control yourself to start listening instead. If you never be quiet and listen and take in wisdom, there's not going to be much for you of value to say. So it's important that you control yourself from always speaking, especially when it's not your turn to speak, so that you can listen. If you haven't been listening, why would you think you have the understanding to offer to other people? On the flip side, if you hold your tongue and you guard your mouth when it's time to listen, you can store up wisdom. If you listen for instruction and you submit to God's commands when they're given to you, you hear other people's wise insight, you can store it up for when you need it and also for when other people need it. Again, verse 8, we'll just look at the first part of some of these verses again. The wise in heart receive commandments. Verse 13, the lips of him that hath understanding, in the lips of him that hath understanding, wisdom is found. Verse 14, wise men lay up knowledge. It's like they're treasuring, they're laying up a treasure house or a storehouse of knowledge. Verse 20, the tongue of the just is as choice silver. The mouth of the just, and verse 31, the mouth of the just bringeth forth wisdom. So you can kind of see how it's kind of giving a picture of a wise person who, before they ever start speaking, they have a habit. They've developed the habit of listening for wisdom, listening for knowledge when it's offered to them, and they store it up. They hear it, they pay attention to it, and they lock on. They say that's valuable, and they store it away for later. I think a great example, if you were here on Sunday night, Pastor Doss was preaching, and he referenced a quote from a sermon that he heard when he was a teen. And that's an example of hearing something and paying attention to it, a very important nugget of wisdom, and then storing it away in such a way that you can access it and use it for later. That's a wise thing to do. It's an example of and again, if he hadn't been speaking when it was time to listen, he wouldn't have been able to receive that wisdom to use for himself and to offer to other people. So when it's time to be listening, listen. And pay attention and store it. Store it for later. When someone who's an older, wiser, and godly husband or wife gives you counsel on how to be a better spouse, pay attention to that. Don't think you know better. When the Scripture gives you commands, you rather than saying, "Well, I don't get that, so I'm going to do it my way," you say, "Maybe I don't understand why God says to do it this way, but I'm just going to do that. I trust Him. I'll do that, and I don't fully comprehend why this is the best thing, but I'll hold on to it. I'll store it up, and when the situation of life requires that piece of wisdom, I'll live by it." And then when other people need that wisdom, it's like your tongue as choice silver. It's like you have these treasures of wisdom, these wise words yourself that you can draw from. The person who's always talking doesn't have much to draw from, right? You're always talking, you're never laying up wisdom and knowledge and understanding. But if you take the time to stop and listen and store up, then when it is your turn to offer genuine wisdom and counsel to someone else, then it's your turn to pass on some of that wisdom that you've treasured up. And your tongue is like the tongue of silver, of choice silver, that you can bring forth wisdom from. If you try to be a teacher before you've become teachable, you're going to talk your way into disaster. But if you will close your mouth and listen, you might just become wise enough to become a teacher to someone else. So, this guard here is to guard your speech, to be quiet and teachable before becoming or trying to become a teacher yourself. The next guard for the mouth we'll look at comes in verses 12, 18, and 19. We can read those again real quick. It says, hatred stirreth up strifes, but love covereth all sins. In verse 18, he that hideth hatred with lying lips, and he that uttereth slander is a fool. In the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise. In these verses, a fool is again revealed by his much speaking. But this time it's not just that he talks over people, but that he talks about people and to people in a way that in ways that are hurtful, that do harm to them. And there's different ways to do that. One way is by just carelessness, and another way is by doing it on purpose. And both of those are in view here. The first, we'll just consider what it means to do that carelessly. Words are very powerful things, much more powerful than we often give them credit for being. Very suggestive, sometimes even just subconsciously suggestive. To the point where even if maybe you've observed this in yourself, maybe you haven't, but if you had friends or family or parents even that described you with certain characteristics, they say, well, they're not really that smart or something. And maybe you're not even all that offended by it. But you begin to just think of yourself that way because you've heard these words describe you in a certain way. And you just assume that what they say about you is correct. You just assume that, I must not be very smart then. And that's not necessarily true at all. It might just be simply that what's happened is the power of words has convinced you of something, regardless of how true it is or not. Words are very powerful things, and so we need to be very careful with the words that we choose to use when we're talking to people or about people, because it very much will deeply influence them. With words, you can make someone's day or you can ruin it, right? You can encourage somebody or you can dishearten them. You can praise them or you can ruin their reputation. If you chatter about other people's business when it's not your business to be talking about it, you are undoubtedly, you're doing this. You're committing this act of carelessly using speech in a way that is hurting someone else, even if you don't mean to be doing hurt. If you're just always just kind of blabbering on about other people's lives to other people who don't really need to know this stuff, you are inevitably deteriorating your relationships, both the people you're talking about and the people you're talking to. If you run your mouth to other people without considering the effect of your words, inevitably you're going to hurt them. Right? If you never think about how it affects them, maybe sometimes you are helping them too, but I promise you, you're also inevitably hurting them. If you just always talk to them and never think about the weight and the meaning of what you're saying, you're doing things to them you don't even realize. Think your mouth is like a gun. It's a very powerful instrument. And if you use it carefully and shoot it off all the time, somebody's going to get hurt. Right? If you're just throwing it around, inevitably someone will be damaged by it. You have to, in order to be safe with your words, you have to carefully point them and direct them on purpose. Think about, where is this, like with a gun, you always consider like the target and what's beyond it. Think about your words. Where are these words going to land? What is the effect of me saying this on this person? It's not just what I feel like saying and what I want to say, but what does it do to them? When I speak to them in this way, what effect does it have on their life, on their mind, Careless speech is foolish because it hurts other people. But worse than careless speech is when you carefully craft your words to do damage. And that's called slander. Sometimes we hurt people because we just didn't think about what we were saying. And that's one level of foolishness. But it's a much deeper level of foolishness when we consciously intend to hurt somebody with our words. And that's not just hurtful, that's hateful. That's hateful. Verse 12 says that hatred stirs up strife. Strife comes from hateful speech. If you have strife in your relationships, if there's this common theme of strife, you can trace it back to hate. To talk about someone else in a way that you're focusing on wrongs that they've done. You're bringing up their dirty laundry, so to speak, to other people. That is a hateful thing to do because it stirs up strife. Whenever you're stirring up strife, you're stirring up contention between other people. You might say you love those people, you might claim to love those people, but what you're doing is you're actually acting in a way that is hateful. Whenever you attack someone else, not just talking about them, but when you talk to them and you attack them with your words, you're acting in a way that is hateful. And ironically, this is oftentimes the people that we do claim to love most, isn't it? It's the people that the people we often have the easiest time being sharp and cutting with our words is usually the ones that we say we love. But here, when you speak in ways that cause strife, that's called hateful. That's not love. So you might say you love those people, but then why do you treat them in a way that is hateful? Why do you use your words as weapons? That's a hateful thing to do. If you keep bringing up wrongs that someone else has done, you're always dragging it up again. It's supposed to be in the past. You said you forgave it, but you keep bringing it up and using it against them. That's hateful. That's not loving. That's hateful. If someone else wronged you and you need to address that, it's good to do that, to bring someone wronged you and you bring it up to address it, to make it right, to sort through it. That's good. You should do that. Or if someone's wronged you and you need to talk to someone to get counsel on, I don't know what to do, and you're not doing it in a spirit of gossip, but you're going to someone you can trust, who can help you navigate it. That's good. You should do that. But whenever you're bringing up things that should have been forgiven, or you're talking with people who you're not trying to get counsel, you're just trying to you're just let off some steam, right? You're speaking in a way that is causing strife, and that is called hate in this passage. Hate. So how do you talk about your friends behind their back? You talk about them in a way that you would also talk about them to their face, or about your spouse? Do you complain about your spouse to others? Meanwhile, you don't address those problems face to face with your spouse? Do you slander fellow church members because they do things that you think are bad and wrong, but you don't address that directly? These are all ways of stirring up strife. And what they all have in common is you're using your words in a way that manifests a lack of love. In fact, even a hate that needs to be repented of, that needs to be seriously needs to be addressed. Because if you're speaking in these ways, what I can promise, if not isn't happening already, will soon happen, is you will begin reaping what you've sown, and you'll start to see some strife in your life. You're going to start seeing some strained relationships and people who have a hard time trusting you with information because they don't know where it's going to go, and family members who really don't like talking to you because every time they talk to you, you cut them down and stuff. These are the consequences of using your speech in ways that is cutting and sharp and hateful. Verse 18 says, "He that hideth hatred with lying lips, and he that uttereth slander is a fool." So if your solution to, well, I have a problem with this person, is to just, well, then I'll just keep it bottled up inside. It says, "He that hideth hatred with lying lips is also a fool." So the solution to the problem isn't just to pretend like there's no problem and to just, smile and you're covering up your tension and your strife with that person just by lying about things being good when they're really not. That's not, according to this, that is also a foolish thing to do. The solution is not to just pretend like you have no problem. The solution, and this might sound cliche, but this is what I believe this is what this passage is really bringing forth, is the solution is to choose to love the other people. Choose to love the other person. Love is a choice. As a Christian, you are set free from sin. You're set free from the works of the flesh, which are, wrath and strife and evil speaking and all those things. And we're set free to act in the ways that the Holy Spirit would have us act, in the fruit of the Spirit with love. So you're given the ability as a Christian to choose to love. Love should be the guard of your mouth, the guard of your speech, that stands guard at your mouth and only lets things through that pass the test of, does this represent love? Does this come from a heart of love to the person to whom I'm speaking? If you love someone, you won't slander them. You won't keep anger bottled up inside. A good test to run things through is a test that our Lord gave us, which is, if your places were swapped, how would you want them to be speaking to you or about you? Right? If whenever you're about to speak to someone or speak about someone, just run it through the test. If I were them right now, what would I want to be said? Right? Because we all make mistakes, right? Especially if someone's done wrong and they made a mistake and you want to get mad at them, just remember first, okay, I've made mistakes too. When I make mistakes, how would I want to be corrected? What would be the best thing for me? And then do that. Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So this is a good speech, a good guard to run your speech through. A loving heart guards your mouth from slander. You won't gossip and demean and ruin other people's reputations if you love them. Right? You don't treat people you love that way. So if you say you love them, then act in a way that's loving. And when you are tempted to speak those ways, choose to not use your words hatefully. Choose rather, I'm going to choose to love. I'm going to choose to guard my mouth from saying something like that because that is a work of the flesh. That is a work that will hurt them. And rather, I want to love them. A loving heart produces a guarded mouth. A wise heart also avoids the danger of speaking too much. Oftentimes, wisdom in speech is simply knowing what not to say and when not to speak. Right? You might be assumed to be a wise person just for having not said anything. It's better to how does this saying go? I'm sure you've heard it's better to leave your mouth closed than someone say it for me. It's better to let people think you're a fool, but to not speak and rather than to speak and to remove all doubt, something along those lines. There's a really clever, catchy way of saying it, and now I can't remember how to say it. So it's kind of a proverb, but I don't have that one memorized. It's not in the Bible though. So, but that one's not a Bible proverb. But it's very similar to the ones that are being said here. Some of the ones that are being said here, which is if you can simply just hold your tongue, that alone is an act of wisdom in speech. There are times when the best thing you can do is pause before your next sentence and ask yourself, would I want this to be said to me? Would I want this to be said about me? If you don't like being insulted, then don't use insults. Right? If you don't like being belittled and demeaned, don't talk to your family that way. If you're hurt when someone else gossips, then just assume it's going to hurt the other person just as much. Love is just as much about what you do not say as it is about what you do say. In fact, sometimes it's more about that. Right? It is very important to tell people that you care about on a regular basis, that you love them and you care about them and things like that. But if you say those kinds of things and then you go around and use the same mouth to put them down and to hurt them, it really diminishes the weight of the words, I love you, when you say that. So it might be a better demonstration of your love to learn to hold your tongue, if that's what you need to do right now. One more pitfall of speech that we'll discuss from these verses is that of using speech in a corrupt or a twisted manner. The last verse in the chapter says, the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked speaketh frowardness. Frowardness. That's another word that we don't really use anymore. And if you're reading quickly and not really thinking about it, your brain might just fill in the meaning forwardness or something, which is not what that word means at all. We don't use it very much, so you might not be familiar, but the idea of frowardness is it's something that is perverted or quite literally crooked or twisted and gnarled. It's corrupted. It's a corrupt communication, you could say, in this case. And corrupt communication shows up in a wide variety of ways. It could be, one example of corrupt communication is being manipulative, in a way in which you use your words to try to always force your will over people without being so confrontational about it, right? You've become pretty clever about how to kind of weaponize your words, but in a very subtle way. And you're very good at getting people to do just whatever you want, just simply with the power of your words. That would be an example of corrupt and twisted speech. It might even be beyond verbal communication. If you look at verse 10, it says, he that winketh with the eye causeth sorrow. And then it contrasts with, but a prating fool shall fall. So I think the contrast there is if a prating fool or someone who's always talking is contrasted with someone that winks with the eye. I think the idea there is someone who is doing the same thing the other fool does, but without using their lips. They use nonverbal communication. They wink. It's like the idea is they're kind of communicating in a way that doesn't even require words. And some people have gotten so clever in their manipulation that they're able to even leverage their facial expressions and their body language to exert their will over other people. Maybe you've learned how to make people feel sorry for you. You can kind of use your puppy dog eyes, or you can kind of slouch a little bit, and you kind of make people feel bad for you, and okay, I'll do what you want. Like that would be an example of maybe you weren't even using your words exactly, but you've learned how to use your body, your nonverbal communication to twist people and bend people to what you want with no regard for how it affects them. If you use your words or other means to manipulate people to doing always what you want, you're taking advantage of them. You're using your communication in a corrupt way. That's not what God gave us the ability to communicate for. He didn't give us the amazing ability to speak and to use body language and so on, so that we could always just exert our will over other people. There's much greater goods that we could be using our communication for. Corrupt or froward speech, another example of it would be using words that are filthy or vulgar. This chapter also speaks of the wicked, whose mouths are covered with violence. It's like their mouth is like a weapon to cause harm. And we talked a little bit about that earlier, but often that's how vulgar or mean or hurtful or swear words are used. As that would be another. That's corrupt. It's coming from a place of corruption. All that is corrupt, twisted frowardness. Corrupt speech comes from a corrupt heart. If you look again at verse 21, it says, "The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for want of wisdom." Interestingly, the literal word for wisdom there, the Hebrew word behind that, isn't the normal word. It's the word for heart. It's the word for heart. So you could say, fools have corrupt lips because they lack a heart that is submitted to God's wisdom. They die for lack of heart. They don't have a genuine good heart. And so the reason we see the fool in this chapter always speaking foolish things and hurtful things and using their words as weapons is because it's simply what's in their heart. What was in their heart is coming out of their heart through their mouth. Fools have corrupt lips because they have a corrupt heart. Vulgar words come from an angry heart. It's funny how even maybe if you've ever struggled with swearing and cussing and all that before, then maybe you got over that bad habit at some point, but maybe later maybe years later, you get so angry about something, and you use a word you didn't think you'd use that word anymore. There's many people that have experienced this. This is a kind of a common thing, and the reason for that is because those hurtful words, those vulgar words, are just tied directly to anger, right? So if you find yourself using words that are vulgar words or hurtful words, that comes from a heart. The problem is the heart of anger. It's showing a heart that's angry. If your speech is corrupt, check on your heart. If you develop a heart of love, you can keep yourself from speaking corruptly. So this guard for your mouth is, rather than speaking corruptly, you cultivate a heart of love and words that tend to others' well-being. Look at the first half of verses 11, and it says, the mouth of a righteous man is a well of life. And then verse 21, the lips of the righteous feed many. And then finally the last verse, the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable. So we'll just look at those, try to apply those real quick. The mouth of a righteous man is a well of life. Do you realize that your mouth is an instrument? It's an instrument for your heart to use. Paul wrote in Romans 6, neither yield ye your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, but yield yourselves unto God as those that are alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness unto God. So your mouth is one of those instruments, one of those members that can be yielded as an instrument of either unrighteousness or righteousness. Your words are not simply neutral things. You are either using them as tools to do good and right and the will of God, or else you're using it to do your own will and your own desires and that which is sinful and selfish. And we know that Jesus himself has said that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof on the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. That puts a lot of weight on what you say, right? Whenever you speak to someone in a way that you're not sure, should I talk that way to them? Well, just quickly imagine yourself standing before Jesus on the day of judgment and recounting those words to him. If they don't pass that test, you probably shouldn't say them, because guess what? That's literally going to happen. Right? You're actually going to. Jesus said, every idle word, every little word you thought was no big deal, you're going to stand before him and you're going to answer to him as to why you used that word. So you should be careful. Right? The mouth of a righteous man is a well of life. It's not neutral. It's either righteous or unrighteous. So the righteous man uses his words as a well of life. If you use your words rightly, you can become a source of help and wisdom and encouragement to other people. That when they need refreshment, like when you need a fresh drink of water, or you need someone who's just, when they talk to you, you're going to leave the conversation refreshed. Right? Maybe you know some people like that. A righteous person they become known that way because of how they've used their words. Right? If you use your words as this constant source of refreshment to other people, you are like a well of life to the people around you. Right speech is life speech. It's life-giving. The next one was from verse number 21, the lips of the righteous feed many. And that Hebrew word for feed there is literally to shepherd. You can use your words as little shepherds, guiding people to that which will nourish their mind and their soul. You can contrast this with someone who only uses their speech to manipulate and benefit themselves. Instead, switch your mindset. Don't use your words to get benefit for you, but think about, how can I use my words to feed them, to nourish them, to shepherd them, to offer to them good direction that will help them. That's what the lips of the righteous do. And then finally, in the last verse, the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable. To know means to be familiar with, to be well acquainted with. It means the righteous person's lips are well acquainted with words that are acceptable. That idea of acceptable there is being favorable. It's favorable to the hearers. And that's not the same as flattery. Don't take that as flattery, but rather that, again, whenever people leave having heard you speak, they always walk away better for what they heard. Not hurt, not confused, but better, refreshed, encouraged, helped, not drained, sometimes corrected, which doesn't always feel good, but at least helped for your speaking, because you've been favorable towards them. You didn't speak in a way that cut them down, but you spoke acceptable words. These are guards for your mouth and for your heart, that if you'll follow these, it will greatly enhance your life, your relationships. It will make you have greater use of God. It will make you more useful to God to be used in other people's lives to help them if you will follow these principles. I just want to conclude with, again, the words of Jesus, who said this: "A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things." The heart is going to pull from, or the mouth is always going to pull from the heart. So what you're speaking is showing what's going on in your heart. You can trace bad speech back to something that's gone wrong in your heart. So if there are ways in which in your relationships, you're just constantly breaking some of these principles that we looked at tonight, trace it back to what's wrong in my heart, what needs to be addressed here, what needs to be repented of, and then find it and confess that to the Lord, and then start trying to put these guards on your mouth. Let these principles guard the way that you speak to others, because you guard what you value. So if you love and you value other people, guard them, guard your mouth. We'll close in a word of prayer.